Awesome. Welcome back in YouTube world. I hope you are having an awesome day. My camera is actually over there this time. Hope you're having an awesome day. Please subscribe below for all of the wonderful content that we continue to produce at a really ridiculous rate. I think it's just insane how much content I put out there, but it is all to lay the seeds, the foundation to grow into something more. So Kenny Atkinson. Let's talk about the Brooklyn Nets head coach, or should I say former Brooklyn Nets head coach. Kenny Atkinson was relieved of his duties today as head coach of the Brooklyn Nets. A fascinating situation indeed, because this is another prime example of a trend in sports that doesn't get a lot of notoriety, and it's not something that you might recognize on the surface. Trying to get that Aztec hat in there. The game is this afternoon, but by the time you see it, the game will be over. So into the future. It feels weird not looking into the camera over there because it looks like I'm looking into the distance. So Kenny Atkinson has been relieved of his duties in Brooklyn, and this is again a fascinating case of the coaches who go through these long rebuilds. The coaches they hire to man the rebuilds are usually not the coaches that kind of produce. They get to reap the fruits of their labor. Usually there's a coach that goes through the rebuild, and then another coach comes in and gets a lot of the, not necessarily the credit, but becomes the winning head coach for the team. And it's a fascinating case because is it fair? No. And if that's going to be the case, why do these coaches continue to take such jobs? It's obvious, because getting an NBA head coaching job does wonders for the trajectory of your career. I mean, it does wonders for how far your career can go. And in a fascinating case, you look at what's about to happen with Brett Brown in Philadelphia. He was one of those few cases where a coach decided, or that the team basically kept the coach through the rebuild into a little bit of the kind of reaping the rewards a little bit. Where if you look at what the Lakers did with Luke Walton, like he goes through the rebuild for 3 years. They don't win in the first year with LeBron just because he's hurt. Luke Walton gets fired, and he has to go to Sacramento to again rebuild another team. It's a fascinating situation to find some of these coaches in, because when you evaluate it from just a perspective of, the coaches that rebuild, usually if the process is going to succeed, as Brooklyn went through a long process, Philadelphia went through a long process, the Lakers went through a long process to get back to prosperity. We see it sometimes in baseball when you look at what's going to happen with Texas and Chris Woodward when you talk about a rebuild, when you look at what happened with Don Mattingly and the Dodgers, where he sowed the fruits of labor and then got a couple playoff runs, but ultimately Dave Roberts came in and took a lot of the credit out of that situation. Alex Cora coming in Boston. Like, we see these situations a lot, and I think Brett Brown is one of those few situations where the coach got to stay all the way through. Now, Brett Brown could only last so long, and the picturesque example of a coach who gets to go through the process and then maintain his job is probably going to be fired at the end of the season, which is a difficult position to be in there, given all the work that he had been through to get to that point. And, it's a tough position to be in if you're a guy like Brett Brown or Kenny Atkinson, because when you take the job, it's going to be a long road up. I mean, a lot of these guys, they're just lucky to get the head coaching job. They know it's going to be a climb up. They're usually the third or fourth candidate that the team wanted to hire, so it's a weird situation to put yourself in as they kind of exfoliate and get players. And for the general manager, I forgot the name of the general manager for the Sean Marks. As Sean Marks continues to build up the Brooklyn Nets, it's a fascinating situation because they get these young players that come in. You can talk about the NBA especially. Does coaching breed talent, or does talent breed coaching? And how hard is it to differentiate the two? I think in the NBA, coaching means less than anything before, because you can succeed with great talent, but bad coaching, you can sometimes succeed even with bad coaching. Now, good coaching obviously makes a huge difference. When you look at Budenholzer in the switch with the Bucks, or you talk about Tyronn Lue to the Cavs makes a little bit of a difference because he was a first-time head coach. He had never really been in this coaching position, but he was a better coach undoubtedly than Blatt. They brought Blatt over from, I think it was Russia or Turkey or something, and it was a weird hire to begin with, and then LeBron came in and the trajectory of the franchise changed. When we talk about head coaches, especially in the NBA, the Cavs are one of those fascinating case studies that we can look at, especially with the David Blatt situation, to evaluate the coach reaping the rewards of his labor. David Blatt doesn't count. His only labor was LeBron James decided to come play for his team. And he was going to do that whether David Blatt was the head coach, whether Phil Jackson was the head coach, or whether the ghost of Red Auerbach was the coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers. LeBron was going to play for that team no matter what. And we look at, especially with Atkinson now, this is a trend that I've seen before, and as much as it's a trend that exists in the NBA, you look at what Dave Yeager did with Sacramento before he got fired, and Sacramento didn't end up reaping the benefits. But it's when teams feel like they can make that next big leap that they move on from the coach and try and bring in a bigger and better name to try and push the envelope forward. I know the Titans did that with Mike Mularkey, even though was it Mike Mularkey or Mike Munchak? I think it was Mike Mularkey. They fired him and brought in another coach to reap the benefits, but it wasn't the same kind of case here as we see a light sprinkle drop on us right now. Kenny Atkinson finds himself in a position where, it was a tough job that he took in the first place, but then he ended up getting the benefits of KD and Kyrie. Then the objectives of the team changed, and I guess Brooklyn. This one was a little more surprising. I thought Brett Brown would be the one that would go before Atkinson, but especially considering that they're going to make the playoffs this year with an assistant coach, and usually the NBA less so, but for other sports leagues, usually firing a coach kind of means you're just punting on the season. So in a fascinating turn of events, we see someone like Atkinson who, when he took the job, there was nothing, and then him and Marks built it up to something, and then Atkinson has to go. It's a cruel nature of the sport. We see it all the time, but I think, why is that the case? Well, Kenny Atkinson wasn't necessarily a sexy hire when he got brought in by Brooklyn. Most of the big coaches wouldn't want to go coach a Brooklyn team, so most times you're going to get a first-time head coach coming in, but Atkinson did a great job given the circumstance that he was walking into. An assistant coach, I forgot where he was an assistant coach, came in, built the team up. We're seeing the same thing with Taylor Jenkins in Memphis, was the same case, even though getting Ja Morant, they boosted themselves right to the playoffs. At first, he's in the same boat as Atkinson going through the rebuild. Lloyd Pierce is going to be a real example in Atlanta. How long does he get with the Hawks, and at what point, when the fruits of their labor kind of breed full circle, does Lloyd Pierce get to maintain his job before they go in another direction? These are cases that will go on in the future. Brett Brown was one of those cases where Colangelo wanted to fire Brett Brown. I want to talk about Brett Brown a lot, but I haven't really gotten to that point here. Colangelo wanted to fire him, but he was so popular among the players and popular among the fans that it was kind of taken out of his decision. Like, it wasn't really up to him whether or not the coach stayed or the coach left. And as tricky as that was for Brett Brown, it was because of his popularity and because of his stature among the players, he was able to maintain his job into like post process and into like actually trying to win. But now the underperformance is going to push him out the door, and I 100% agree with the decision to bring in another coach. Brett Brown was a fascinating hire in the first place because he was such a promising assistant in the NBA ranks, coming from Popovich. He was Popovich's lead assistant for, I think, 3 or 4 years, coming up there, and then bringing that to Philadelphia, even through a long rebuild, was fascinating. I think this is either his 7th or 8th year, and it'll probably be his last. But he was the kind of gold standard for a coach that takes a job through a rebuild and is able to reap a little bit of the rewards. Atkinson never got the chance to do that. Even though they drafted well, it was really KD and Kyrie deciding to come there that got him the benefit. Same thing with Luke Walton, like LeBron choosing to come play for him helped give him the benefit of, he went through the rebuild. He was there when I believe it was Lonzo got drafted, and then the other one would have had to have been Ingram. So he was there. He became the head coach when they drafted Ingram, and he was the second-year coach when they drafted Lonzo Ball, and then LeBron came in for 1 year. They didn't have a draft pick, but LeBron came in. He coached his third season, and they moved off of him. He went through the rebuild and had to work his way up through the tenure of the Lakers. The Lakers' failures coming from the Warriors, the top assistant. You knew it was a match made in heaven, and he had to go through that as the lead assistant, becoming the coach of the Lakers. And then from there, he went through the process of the rebuild with the team that he won the championships with, and in the end it didn't work out because LeBron wanted a different head coach, and that first season was a wash because LeBron got hurt. We're going to see this trend continue where the top coaches end up taking the jobs of the like low-rung assistants, getting their first head coaching jobs. They go through the rebuild, they reap the benefits, but they get to the top, but then they don't get to reap the benefits of winning because they get fired before then. It's a fascinating trend that has existed for a couple years. I've been focusing on it, especially in the Brett Brown situation, when there were talks that Brett Brown had to get to the Eastern Conference Finals last year to save his job. I'm like, that is an unfair expectation for a guy who, this was their second playoff run. This was their second playoff run. They were the third best team in the conference. Therefore, you were saying if you don't overachieve, you're going to be fired. And then after all that he went through in the process, bringing in new talent like Jimmy Butler and them, they performed to expectations. This year they performed below expectations when they were supposed to take another step. That's why Brett Brown is inevitably going to be fired. Kenny Atkinson was surprising, especially having it happen mid-season, but it goes to show the life is tough when you take those jobs. Obviously, if you're a lead assistant somewhere, like I forgot where Lloyd Pierce was coming from, but Taylor Jenkins in Memphis, if you're a first-time head coach, an assistant with Milwaukee, and you get a chance to run your own team, you take the job 10 times out of 10. These jobs are so few and so difficult to come by. Unless your name is Josh McDaniels, it's hard to get head coaching offers. You take the jobs, but ultimately you're not signing up to succeed. You're not signing up to win championships. You're signing up to rebuild. And unless you're a special kind of coach, and those coaches usually get figured out faster than coming up through the assistant rankings. You look at a case like Fizdale and Luke Walton and who are we talking about? Brett Brown, soon to be, and Kenny Atkinson. And you look at soon to be Taylor Jenkins and Lloyd Pierce and guys like that, and it's really, you're not setting up to win, you're setting up to rebuild a team, and then another coach who has proven his success before, Budenholzer, Frank Vogel, Phil Jackson did it twice in the 90s and 2010s. One of those guys is going to end up reaping the rewards because you've built up a job that now has value, and the team doesn't value you as much as these other coaches want those jobs that maybe they didn't want when it first became available because they were going through a rebuild.